Norris has the full upgrade package, Piastri has not. So there's a split which we saw last year. We've seen that again at the start of this year. But yeah, speaking to members of the team, they quite like it. There's a load of updates, all to try and improve the downforce, the airflow. And this was a circuit they were pretty woeful on last year. How times have changed this year. They're hopeful, confident of fighting right at the sharp end, but they need a good practice.
Yeah, I've just been speaking to Andrea Stella, Jolie, and the team principal at McLaren. He described this upgrade as slightly smaller than the one in Austria last year. I pointed out to him that the Austria upgrade was worth about a second a lap. So what did he mean by slightly smaller? And he said, it wasn't a second lap in Austria, it was about a second lap over Austria and Singapore upgrades. I'm not sure he's absolutely right with his numbers there, but who am I to argue with Andrea Stella? But that suggests, as you say, that this is really quite a major step forward from McLaren. But we should just hold our horses a little bit, because one of the McLaren's weaknesses is slow corners. Obviously a lot of slow corners on this track. And Stella was saying that it's going to take another upgrade to address their weakness in slow corners.
But this rhetoric is played out all the time. They're not even that bad in slow corners. They're not as competitive as they are in high-speed corners, but there's a lot of slow, fiddly, horrible corners in China, and Lando was second in the race. They're not bad in slow speed, but that is a comparative weakness. But yeah, they're very bullish, and it'll be interesting to see as they head straight out onto circuit if they have to get a clean session to get a bit of an understanding. But it transformed them last year in Austria from pretty much the back of the field to podium contenders regularly.
It certainly did. The green light is on at the end of the pit lane, and free practice 1 is go. 59 minutes and 28 seconds remain. Straight out on the track was the Haas of Kevin Magnussen, followed by the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. Then those two McLarens with upgrades, Piastri and Norris. Should say pretty much every team has brought upgrades with the exception of Ferrari and Alpine. Andrew, let's just set the scene briefly, because this is another sprint weekend. Now, if you weren't with us in China, there has been a slight change to the setup of the sprints. Could you just talk us through it?
So yes, it's different from last year. Basically, the new format is we get this practice session as normal, and then the sprint, the whole sprint thing is dealt with before the whole Grand Prix thing. So instead of having Grand Prix qualifying on Friday, then a sprint day on Saturday, it's going to be sprint qualifying this afternoon, and then the sprint tomorrow morning, or the first thing tomorrow, I should say, 'cause it's not actually the morning, either in Miami or in the UK. Then Grand Prix qualifying after that, and then the Grand Prix is normal on Sunday.
Well, cars out on track then, and it is a tricky circuit. Let's hear from Norris.
Something doesn't feel right. It's much harder to turn right than it is left. It's really easy to turn left and really hard to turn right.
Okay, understood.
That's Norris on the radio here. So, differences in the easiness of turning left and right.
Yeah,
Ever had that?
I don't recall it. It sounds like a steering rack issue or something for Norris, as he has a little weave down the back straight, and he'll get on the brakes for the final corner. And will he dive into the pits or start a flying lap? Still having a bit of a play with the steering just to try and get some feeling. And yeah, he peels off to the right-hand side. He's going to flash past us and amble past us, really, and come into the pits. We've just literally had said they need a
Constructors' Championship, it's Red Bull who lead the way. 195 points they have. That's 44 more over second place Ferrari. Then it's McLaren, Mercedes and Aston Martin, the top 5. And then in the battle for the second half of the field, it's RB who lead the way with 7 points. That puts them 6th overall. Just a couple of points ahead of Haas. Then it's Williams, Sauber and Alpine who make up the final 3 spots, yet to get off the mark, as home hero Logan Sargent, who was born not far from here, Fort Lauderdale.
I think home hero is a bit of a stretch, Harry, to be honest with you.
Have you not seen? I can see the Logan Sargent flags in the grandstands. Well, I mean, look, this is this Logan Sargent's farewell tour in terms of US Grand Prix? He'll get 2 more after this.
Really?
Well. So what are you hearing from Andrew? What are you hearing, Andrew?
I think he might be out for the next race in America, which is not till Austin in October. So we'll see. I don't know that for sure, but he's on rocky ground at the moment. Logan Sargent, he's just not performing.
It has been a tricky year for Logan. Who do we think then would be the main contender to replace him?
Well, the obvious thing that would work holistically for both Williams and Mercedes would be to put Andrea Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes protege, who's in Formula 2 at the moment, in that car, because Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, is considering putting Antonelli in the car that Lewis Hamilton's vacating next year to go to Ferrari. That's obviously a bit of a step, putting someone like that straight into a Mercedes. Not that Mercedes expects to be competing for the championship next year, but obviously sort of 2/3 of a season in a Williams would be a nice way of warming him up for a Mercedes seat next year.
It's actually a bit of a madness, though, isn't it? He's bypassed Formula 3, and now he's effectively going to bypass Formula 2. He's done 3 race weekends. He hasn't stood on the podium in Formula 2. And if he's going to be coming in for Logan Sargent, which we think could be imminent, unless Sargent can provide some level of turnaround, which I don't think Andrew Benson's holding his breath for at the moment, then he's going to go from effectively like Formula 4 level to Formula 1 in the space of months. He's got a lot of preparation driving the Mercedes F1 car, the old car, and he is, a very bright future talent, but that would be some Kimi Räikkönen 2001 style of rise.
Well, this is Toto Wolff's sort of almost redemption. Here's Piastri first.
Steering feels quite heavy.
Oh dear.
Copy. Heavy, but the same both ways, Oscar, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So Oscar Piastri also then with some steering issues.
Okay, so Norris remains in the pits, having just done the outlap, and that's why the radio message back to Piastri then was, is it definitely the same in both directions? Now, McLaren, amongst their other changes, have changed the front geometry, the front suspension, and I wonder if there's something linked there that has been an issue then for Lando, and Piastri radioing a similar message.
Charles Leclerc, with an issue in his Ferrari, has had to come to a stop, pulled in on the inside. The car's completely stopped. He's actually facing the wrong way out of the corner in sector 3. That's coming on to that long back straight out of turn 16 all the way down to turn 70. He's trying to do a 360 to turn it around, but he's got stuck right on the racing line. He's rolling back now. Hamilton and the Mercedes has to come to a stop to let Leclerc do his, well, it's going to be a bit more than a 3-point turn, Jody.
He's made a pig's ear of this. Coming out of turn 16, it's a really long straight. I don't know how he's managed to just loop it there, presumably on the throttle. And he is now broadside, but he can't get there's not enough space to get the power down and do a spin turn. So he's having to do a 17-point turn, and right now he's in about 0.5 of it, and everyone else can finally crawl past. It's a yellow flag and nothing more at the moment, but he's got the engine running still. This is a bizarre one. You don't realise how narrow that part of the track is until there's a car pointing sideways on it, and there's very little wriggle room.
It is really narrow. It's a long 1.28 kilometre back straight, DRS activated just a few moments in. He's before that line, so we haven't seen how it happened yet. Hopefully we'll see a replay and let you know if he's lost it coming round the left-hander of turn 16 that brings you on to that back straight. But he's trying to find reverse, clearly, but all the other cars are going behind him in the space that he needs to occupy.
He must have just spun the car, lit it up on the throttle, and how much would you be pointing 180 degrees the wrong way on that part of the circuit? But it's so narrow. He's done well to do that and not hit the barrier. I can't see any level of damage. Get another shot of it now. Through 14, it's a left-hander, up the hill, bouncing through the fiddly part at 15. Gets to, he's just lost it on the apex, really. little bounce over the curb and the car's spun. Wasn't going very quick, and that's why he's not hit the barrier.
No, it's a lucky escape, though, for Charles Leclerc, because as he went round, the rear wing so close to hitting the barrier, just about gets away with it by mere inches. Luckily, no car was speeding around the corner after him either, and he let it roll back a little bit just to find some space.
Red flag now as well. So Leclerc's still stationary down there. He's now lost the engine. The car will be overheating with the amount of time he's down there. And yeah, well, he lost the car at the apex, very low speed. He's at inches from just snagging the rear wing on the wall as it came through. But then you can't really drive backwards towards the apex. It was a really sketchy part that he actually stopped the car in. Blind corner for everyone else. It's a street circuit in effect. And so no one would see him around the corner. So he didn't want to drive backwards to get some momentum to do a spin turn, which meant he had to just try and navigate around in whatever way he can. Still in the car, visor up. 1 hour of practice, and this is not good for Leclerc either.
Yeah, and a red flag in practice. The clock still counts down as Charles Leclerc, there, car off, climbs out of the cockpit, now wearing his all-blue Ferrari race suit, puts the steering wheel back in, and everybody else who is still out on track making their way back towards the pit lane. Verstappen with the fastest lap time up until this red flag period, half a tenth clear of Hamilton, Perez, Magnussen, Piastri, the top 5.
So I don't understand why the engine was running and he seemed to be able to move the car, and then he's had to get out of the car. And then, because you'd think if the engine goes off, he can restart it on the KERS system. Why can't he just restart it now that there's a red flag? It was a slightly farcical situation. All the cars were coming past him, but they were not going to get laps done because he was in the middle of the road. So it was like, why didn't they just... Red flag's the right decision, but to solve it, but I don't get why he's out of the car.
Well, I wonder if it's temperature related. When you're stationary for so long, then it's a hot day anyway in Miami, where nearly 30 degrees air temperature. You're sitting there stationary, you're getting no cooling to the car, just slowly cooking it, and reliability concerns then become an issue. And I wonder if he's also, the other question is, has he not managed to find reverse, and he's just pitched nose in towards the wall and he's not found reverse?
He was reversing at one point.
I think he was rolling, wasn't he? I don't know. Either way, this is a disaster for Leclerc. 1 hour of practice and he's not really going to be in it. He's on one flying lap, and this was a circuit he crashed twice on last year. Within one flying lap on the second push, and he's dropped the car again, not hit the wall by luck. This is not what Ferrari needed.
No, he's had a top 4 finish in the opening 5 races of Charles Leclerc, but his Miami Grand Prix weekend not getting off to the best of starts. Good time then to check in with our pit lane reporter, Rosanna Tennant.
Yeah, I'm outside Lando Norris's garage down at McLaren, where the mechanics have been working incredibly hard for the last 4 or 5 minutes, and maybe this red flag somewhat negates the disadvantage they were already going to have by missing so much track time compared to the others. But the front of Lando's car is off. I'm standing here just looking at the front wing, just sitting waiting to be put back on. They've had the side pod cover off. All the mechanics desperately searching for the problem. I've tried to talk to the team about what's wrong. They say they don't know, and that's why they are pulling the car apart to see what Lando's been talking about on the radio. So interesting time. Oh, a front wing as I just get in the way. Mechanics bringing a front wing round for Oscar Piastri now. So lots of data gathering in this session. We know McLaren are bringing upgrades, as Andrew was talking about earlier on in the programme. And I guess this is all part of the learning, but you want to bring an upgrade and you know you're going to get that performance rather than it setting you back and taking you off the track, don't you?
Yeah, you do, especially, at least in Ferrari and Leclerc's case, no upgrades for this weekend, but you just want that track time.
Well, this is the risk of bringing upgrades, a huge raft of upgrades, to a weekend where you only get 1 hour of practice. The benefit of Formula One, the beauty of it for the teams, is that often you get loads of practice, and even if there's not in-season testing anymore, you can work on the car and get it set up through 3 hours of practice, not on sprint weekends. And so for Norris, they needed a clean run. I mean, there's some solace in the fact that it's a red flag now anyway, so if they can get that car fixed and correct their issues, then it'll be no worse off than if it happened, really. But this is not what you need when you're desperate to explore the upgrade package.
So red flag conditions then in this first practice for the Miami Grand Prix. The clock does continue to count down in this case, 47 minutes and 4, 3, 2 seconds remain. This is because Charles Leclerc had a spin coming out of the left-hander of turn 16, approaching that long back straight towards turn 17. Span it round, couldn't get back around, and then had to abandon ship and get out of his Ferrari car. And it's a long walk back from there to the pits. The early lap times to come in, Verstappen setting a 1:31.0. That was the fastest lap time, half a tenth clear of Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Perez, Magnussen, Piastri, the top 5. Sainz, Leclerc, Gasly, Ocon, Tsunoda, the top 10. So that is how that looks, and the rest of them not really getting any competitive number on the board in the early stages. While we have a bit of time, we haven't really spoken too much about one of the driver confirmation moves that has happened coming into this weekend, and that's Nico Hülkenberg signing for Sauber in what will then become Audi in 2026. Former teammate of yours, Jolien, how highly do you rate him?
Yeah, very highly. He's rapid. Over one lap, he's so quick. Audi know that. Andreas Seidel knows that at Audi, and they worked together in Le Mans with Porsche, and that's why he has.
They took the win, didn't they?
Exactly. He's very impressed with Hülkenberg, so he's called him up for Audi. It's been the small news, hasn't it, of the week with all the Adrian Newey chat. There's really overshadowed Nico Hülkenberg going to a manufacturer team that's coming in for 2026. But I think it's an underwhelming, a slightly obvious, but still a good signing for Audi.
Well, they needed a German driver, and there aren't that many German drivers around in Formula One, are there? So it was kind of a no-brainer in that sense.
Do you think they tried Vettel to coax him back?
No.
No.
No, I don't.
Why do you think they needed a German driver?
Well, they say they would prefer a German driver, because German manufacturers are like that. They like to have German drivers in their cars, at least one.
Mercedes aren't too fussed right now.
Mercedes aren't, but Porsche and Audi, so VW Group ones, it's all the time. Without question, they'll have a German driver. And it was the same with BMW. They demanded at least one German driver in that car when they were in Formula One back in the late 2000s with Williams. So Nick Heidfeld, for example, was the chosen one there. He's a bit old for Formula One these days. So Sebastian Vettel's retired. Can you think of any other Formula One standard German drivers? I can't.
They could have got Nico Rosberg.
He's long
back into
retired.
Contention after a cool 10 years.
Pascal Wehrlein's had his time and he's in Formula E now.
So I always felt Wehrlein had a premature end to his career. I felt like he could have been a really good racer and he'd been given a little bit longer. No?
It was okay.
It's tough to impress you, isn't it?
Well, he wasn't any, let's put it this way, he wasn't any better than Marcus Ericsson, who got absolutely taken to the cleaners by Charles Leclerc. So there you go.
Decent driver, but
yeah,
there is a lot of decent drivers in Formula One. It's packed to them. You've got to be a little bit better to stake your claim in it, haven't you? So Hülkenberg must have just been there like, I'm here, guys. I'm here.
What a redemption.
Me or I know nothing.
I love the big stat was whenever Hamilton switches team, Nico Hülkenberg signs for Sauber. That was the main thing, because Nico Hülkenberg has driven for Sauber before, way back in 2013.
That's what you call a small data set, Harry.
Yeah. But I love that. That's the one that stuck out for me. But I mean, what a redemption arc for Nico Hülkenberg as well. I mean, a couple of years ago, he was out of Formula One. Career done. Had a couple of stand-in drives with Racing Point and Aston Martin. But for all intents and purposes, it looked like Helmut was hung up when it came to Formula One. He was testing other cars, but nothing was really interesting him. And now, a couple of seasons with Haas, and he's getting the better of Kevin Magnussen, and he's been absolutely blinding in qualifying. And now he gets another shot at a big constructor.
Well, we don't know how good they're going to be.
True.
Firstly, and of course he was at Renault with me, and then without me. He's going to be 37. In August, so he's no spring chicken anymore, but he is still very quick. And I remember speaking to him in his days of being an Aston Martin reserve, and he'd had the odd super sub appearance, and he was just at peace with sort of thinking his F1 days are over. But now he's back in. He's done very well at Haas. The team have been pretty poor in the race runs last year. This year they're much better, and he's getting some points. And he's done enough to be the only German and take advantage of that and get into the Audi seat. And it's not just because of his nationality. He's just a very fast driver.
Yeah, and I think, look, Audi have obviously got big aspirations in Formula One. They intend eventually to be winning races and championships. But I'm told that while the Audi board's original intention or original target was to be winning, to be at that level within 3 years, they've had a bit of a reality check since they announced that they were coming in 18 months or so ago, and they've reset their expectations and are now thinking more like 5 years. So is Nico Hülkenberg going to be around in 5 years' time? Maybe not. And this is why I think Carlos Sainz, who's their other big choice, that's who they want to be in the other car, that's why he's sort of biding his time a little bit, because he's 30, pushing 30 now, and he's thinking, have I got 5 years to wait to be at the front?
Come in.
Yeah, and just to let you know, we are back underway. Red flag now gone in, green flag out. Sargent's on the lap at the moment, 41 minutes and 18 seconds, Palmer.
Yeah, the 5-year plans give me the shivers. That was what Renault were all about. The last manufacturer team that Hülkenberg came in to join, there was a 5-year plan that became a 6-year plan and a 7-year plan, and now they are Alpine with another 5-year plan to try and move forward. It's a 5-year plan is loose, isn't it? It's we don't think we're going to be great straight away, but give us a bit of time and we'll get there. And I think with Sainz, that much mooted that Sainz will go there, but the big elephant in the room is what on earth happens to Verstappen. And if Verstappen leaves Red Bull following Newey out the door, if Sainz goes to Red Bull, I mean, how has this gone from being him out of a seat at Ferrari to him being in the plum seat at Red Bull? And that's what he's waiting for, I think.
It is, I think, yeah. Just so, by the way, just an update on Charles Leclerc. The answer to my question as to why he had to get out of the car was that the clutch overheated while he was waiting for all the other cars to go past. Ferrari have just told me that. That's the big question. What happens at Red Bull? There's definitely one seat available at Red Bull, because they may or may not re-sign Sergio Perez. There could be two if Verstappen leaves, because he's definitely not happy about the whole situation surrounding Christian Horner and the allegations made against him by a female employee, and now Adrian Newey leaving. Interesting form of language from Verstappen yesterday, by the way, when he was talking about that. He was saying that he would have preferred him to stay. He's a great guy to chat to and relate to, but from the outside it looks very dramatic, but when you know what's happening inside the team, it's not as dramatic as it seems. It's Norris's radio.
I mean, he still doesn't feel amazing. It still feels harder to turn right than it does left for the time being, but I'll just continue and see if it changes at all.
Okay. So that's Norris on the radio. Right from the start of this session, he had steering issues, came back into the pits, is now back out there. Clearly not fully solved yet, Jolien.
No, Piastri's just gone up to fourth. So Perez, Russell, Hamilton are the top three, all on medium tyres. And then it's Piastri on a set of hard tyres. That is what Norris is now also back out on circuit on. And Oscar was talking also about heavy steering, and it didn't feel very good and direct. So I wonder if it's just going to take a little bit of getting used to for the drivers. This is the sound on board Norris's McLaren. He's cruising through the first sector. So maybe it is still a bigger issue, still having a bit of a play with the steering wheel coming into turn 6, 7, 8, which only turns left. You shouldn't be turning right there, but Norris not all that happy. Piastri's finding some pace in the other McLaren.
Yep, currently fastest is Perez, a 1:29.632. 3/10 clear of George Russell. Then it's Hamilton, Piastri, Verstappen, who's on a lap now at the top 5. Let's see how Verstappen gets on this lap. He's on the medium compounder tyre. While he does that, Rosanna.
Yeah, as Lando Norris left the pits, once the mechanics had finished tinkering with his car, he was straight on the weaving in the pit lane, obviously trying to see if the steering was fixed. So it's going to be an interesting session for the McLaren team to see what that problem is, so that they're ready for the sprint qualifying later on today. And just to go back to your pondering about Nico Hülkenberg with the Sauber Audi link up, and then who might partner him, and Carlos Sainz. Of course, Jolien Palmer, you made way for that partnership back in 2017, 2018. And do you guys think that maybe Carlos Sainz doesn't think the Audi proposition's as attractive anymore, because Nico Hülkenberg, well, should I say wiped the floor with Carlos Sainz back then?
I mean, he wiped the floor with me, and that's why I made way for Carlos Sainz. I was just doing the greater good for Audi to give them a bit of research on a future partnership, really. Hülkenberg, he was quicker than Sainz, though, and that's the thing, and he did beat Sainz to the point that Sainz was actually out of Renault, and that's what I think people forget in all this situation here. When you think Sainz is a race winner, he's the only guy that's won a race that's not in a Red Bull, as Verstappen goes straight on at the final corner. And is he going to be able to turn that round just about? A couple of attempts at lighting up the rear wheels, and he gets going again. Yeah, people are thinking like Sainz is right at the top. Is he one of the best drivers in the field? And he's going to step down to Audi. Yet Hulkenberg is towards the back end of the field. Is he going to get sort of come up to Audi? But actually, when they were teammates before 2017, 2018, Hulkenberg was considerably the stronger of the two, and it's easy to forget that when they're at different ends of the grid for now.
I think.
Sorry, Andrew, just seeing how Verstappen ran wide, just the lock up coming into the final corner. Did manage to get it round, but as Julian alluded to, had to get a couple of turns on the steering wheel before finishing off that lap, but ruined and had to go again.
Yeah, I was just going to continue my point about Verstappen while we're talking about him spin turning at the last corner. It's very clear that I've been really impressed by Max Verstappen this year, obviously in the car, but also out of the car. He has managed to put his point across in press conferences against facing some pretty tough questions about the situation with Horner and now Newey, without actually saying anything too damaging to the team. You know, the situation with Helmut Marko being out, you know, he put his foot down there. He's not given Horner his full backing. He's made it clear he's not happy about Newey leaving, but he's done it in a very sort of pretty sensitive way, which kind of belies the character traits that people think he has. People think he's sort of very forthright and direct. He's been very measured and quite politically smart when it comes to his comments, but that shouldn't hide the fact that he's obviously we should all be aware that he's not able to, or feels not able to, say publicly how he's really feeling about it. And I think given that he's gone as far as he has in public, not wanting to cause too many waves, just imagine what he's actually feeling, what he's actually saying behind the scenes, what he's actually discussing with his dad and his manager Raymond Vermeulen about his future. Those are the big questions.
There is clearly a lot going on in the background within that team, and with Newey exiting, it just underlines the bigger question marks surrounding Max Verstappen, but it doesn't seem to be affecting his on-track performances, that's for sure. 34 minutes and 54 seconds remain. Hashtag BBC F1, just on all this Hulkenberg chat. And when we talk about German driver, Jack asks, did Sauber Audi not look at Mick Schumacher? No, categorical no. Will he ever get another chance in Formula One?
I think people saw Mick Schumacher for 2 years, and everyone in Formula One thought the conclusion was that guy's not good enough. So there you go.
Well, there you go, Jack. Nala Pak says Hulk is solid, experienced driver. Give him a good car, and he will drive it well. Might never be great, but he is reliable. And I suppose he does bring a huge amount of experience to a team like Sauber and Audi.
And can he finally get a podium as well? And 37, getting towards 37, never had a podium in Formula One. And Audi, if they get it right, could at least be aiming for a podium here or there. And he is the driver, even though he's not got that to his name. You still feel like he'll deliver when the chance is there.
It's worth mentioning, by the way, guys, that Adrian, just a few minutes ago, we saw Adrian Newey getting onto the pit wall at Red Bull. Worth mentioning that the Red Bull press release on Wednesday that announced he was leaving did say that he would continue to come to races, selected races this year, and continue to provide engineering support for the team. And why not? Because when he goes to another team, there'll be a whole new set of chassis regulations. So in actual fact, he's not really going to take any of that, or it's not as potentially a sensitive an area as it would have been. And just on when he leaves, people are talking about the first quarter of 2025 as if that might mean April or something. It isn't going to be April. It's going to be within the first quarter. So around about the end of February-ish is the sort of period I've been told.
Surely he's checked out of Red Bull, though. He's got, 9 months, Hamilton bouncing over the curb at turn 15. He's on a rapid lap here. Perez is still top of the times, and Hamilton's got a couple of corners to go to try and get right up there. Mercedes having a good start to this session. He's actually up on Perez through 2 seconds, even though he went banging over the curbs.
So remember about your point about surely he's checked out of Red Bull. Remember that Frank Williams said about Adrian Newey that he was the most competitive man he'd ever met in his life.
Okay, but they're going to win everything this year, pretty much. The championship's already there. And
that's not how Adrian looks at things, though.
He can put his feet. He can go to the beach now for 9 months, and everything's just in hand. And then he'll go to the beach next year, or more likely, a competitor. And he doesn't need to give them any more tips. Surely now his work is done. He's created a monster.
His brain doesn't work like that. He never assumed. I think this is why they're so good. And I think his culture, and also Christian Horner's, to be fair, has inculcated the entire team. No quarter is given. They focus on absolutely everything, and Newey, yeah, we can all see that the Verstappen-Red Bull combination is basically unbeatable and is going to walk to another championship. Newey won't be looking at it like that. He looks at every single day at a racetrack as a new day to get the best out of you possibly can.
2026 is a regulation change looking at the engines. It's still effectively a ground effect era, but without Newey, is Red Bull just going to crumble? No?
I don't think crumble. I wouldn't expect it to crumble.
But there was a lot. So there's a lot of questions about he's 50%
The question
time
is how much
issue.
does Adrian Newey's stardust
Yeah.
affect Red Bull? That's the question. And this has been behind some of the tension at the team. The sort of the second order tension that's led to Newey leaving after the Horner situation is a sort of disconnect between what Horner perceives his value to be to the team and what he perceives his value to be to the team. Because he only spends 50% of his time on Formula One these days. You know, Horner's been bigging up the role of the technical director Pierre Vacher and the team under him, and obviously Vacher is in charge technically, and all the departments reporting to him. But Newey's the guy who comes and, you know, gives an idea here and an idea there, and comes up with a concept of the car. Not steers the ship because that's Vacher, but sort of guides the ship when he feels it's necessary to guide it.
Okay.
And the question is that you can never know the answer to, where would they be without that guidance system radio?
Dreaming man.
Yuki Tsunoda on the radio, breaking into the final corner. A bit of traffic was on his inside, forces him to go deep into the corner, then he peels off into the pits.
Yeah, Hamilton also came through and went second on that lap, so still 10th down on Sergio Perez, who's at the top of the times. So Verstappen has not really got a time on the board. He's 15th, having run a set of mediums as well. We saw him lock up, and he's a cool 1.4 seconds down. But I think if Newey leaves, the team they're in a great place. I think they'll be okay. Obviously they'll be absolutely fine for next year. If Verstappen leaves now, then I think you're looking at the implosion of Red Bull, because that driver, Max, he's so good. He is very rarely putting a foot wrong. He is 3/10, 4/10, half a second quicker than Sergio Perez, who's a perfectly solid driver. He was the same ahead of Albon, he's the same ahead of Gasly, all are solid drivers. He is leading that team, and if he goes, you've lost a bit of technical direction, and you've lost your star driver, who is getting the most out of it in the typically ruthless manner that we're so used to from Verstappen. I think that's when they're in a pickle, and that is a real threat for Red Bull moving forward.
There certainly is threat for Red Bull in these early stages. Carlos Sainz has just gone fastest in the Ferrari. The sole remaining Ferrari on the hard compound tyre, a 1:29.3 for Sainz. Almost 3/10 clear of Perez second, Hamilton third, Russell, Joe rounds out the top 5, Ocon, Piastri, Alonso, Tsunoda, Gasly the top 10, Ricciardo, Norris, Stroll, Bottas, Hulkenberg the top 15, then comes Verstappen down in 16th in front of Albon, Magnussen, Sargent and Charles Leclerc, who span in the first few moments of the practice session and found himself out of the car and then having to make a long walk back to the garage.
So Norris has got a time on the board. He went out when he was on track, 5 minutes ago, and he was on a slow lap. Then he did a fast lap. He's 4/10 down on his teammate in 13th, but he then came straight back into the pit. So he has done the fewest laps of anyone bar Leclerc, who is back in the garage already and just watching on for the rest of this session. It's not a happy first half an hour, first half of the only practice session for Lando Norris. The pace looks not disastrous for McLaren, but they're hoping for so much with this, and they're not able to get a read on it right now.
But George Russell currently out there at the moment as well on an outlap down in 4th, just gearing up for 8 fast lap as he comes past the pit lane entry onto the main straight. DRS, the rear wing flap open, heads down towards the right-hander of turn 1. He's got a little bit of traffic in front of him in the form of Sergio Perez in the Red Bull. Makes his way, it's almost a bit sort of like a snake in the first sector. You're going left, then you're going right. Cars left, right and centre trying to dodge out, and then it's an interesting track because we're obviously seeing the pictures and they never quite do it justice, because at some points, as you mentioned earlier, it gets so narrow, Jolien, but also coming into that really tight turn 14, the gradient as well, suddenly the incline is quite steep.
It's steep and clumsy around there. That was the section where Hamilton bounced heavily over the curbs. That part, it gets really narrow. Just after that turn 16 is where Leclerc was pointing the wrong way and couldn't spin it back around. And it's busy, as you said, on the circuit. Russell, DRS shuts as he hits the brakes. Down for turn 11. He's got the Red Bull of Sergio Perez just ahead of him on circuit, moving round the really long right-hander of turn 13. Now he's coming towards the left-hander up the hill, that section, bouncing over the curb, 14 and 15. Brings it quickly back to the right-hand side and goes through the really slow speed 16 where Leclerc had his spin. And he's a long way off. He's on a high fuel run at the moment, George Russell. 2.5 seconds as we pick him up now on board with 1 corner to go. And I think the Red Bull ahead is on a long run as well, so they kind of a bit of a feel for their relative competitive performance. Russell backs off and gives himself a little bit of space for the next lap. It's a flowing circuit in the first sector, and then there's a lot of stop-starts for sectors 2 and 3. We did a track run yesterday.
We did.
It was the sweaty mess that I think we expected from Miami. And I tell you, when you're running it, you really notice. I was ready for the corner to be coming up, and it was the DRS marker. The straights are really whopping long, kilometre long, coming down towards turn 11. Then another really long run where Verstappen has gone back into the runoff area.
I'm front locking quickly at the peak.
So that's Verstappen saying, I'm front-locking too quickly at the peak. What does that mean, Jolyon?
And that's turn 17, so that's the other big stop then at the end of the back straight. And it means that when he's hitting the brake pedal, you're mashing it with your left foot. There's no clutch on the in the pedal box of these cars. It's on the steering wheel. So you've got a left pedal and a right pedal. Your brake and your throttle. And when you come to stop the car, you are hitting the brake so hard because you've got downforce, you've got load on the car, and it's very difficult to actually lock up. But Verstappen is finding when he's going for the initial spike of brake to maximise your downforce, get the most potential out of it, he is finding lockups, and maybe that's just the car's a little bit stiff. It's just finding bumps and parts of the circuit. And that is normally when you'd have the lockups on your peak pressure.
One of the few tracks that Max Verstappen hasn't secured pole position. He's gone on to take some fantastic wins. Remember last year qualifying 9th and destroying Sergio Perez, really.
I think that was his best drive last year in Miami. That and Suzuka. Obviously, he was on a completely different planet from everyone in Suzuka from the very beginning of the weekend. But yeah, he basically won the race in the first stint, didn't he? It was embarrassing for Perez last year.
Don't you think when people talk about Verstappen's best drives, it's so hard to contextualize his best drives? Suzuka, he was good, but he just vanished, didn't he? He just disappeared off. And he makes it look so easy when he wins by 30 seconds, but some of those performances are exceptionally good. He's metronomically fast, and he is just destroying his teammate and everyone else left in his wake. But it's very difficult when there's no big challenge to kind of actually envisage what is a great drive for Verstappen, because they're all just typically good.
He's operating at an incredibly high level all the time, but he's not being challenged. That's the point you're making. And I think and what we don't know is how, because he's incredibly consistent, he's not making mistakes, he looks so calm and mature these days compared to 2021, for example, where he was definitely doing some quite sort of on the limit things with Hamilton. But he hasn't had that challenge since the sort of first half of 2022. And so the one time we saw it was in Las Vegas last year when at the start, he pushed Leclerc wide, do you remember, in a way very similar to the way he'd been dealing with Hamilton in 2021. So you wonder, if he has opposition, will he go back to that Verstappen, or will he become some kind of sort of halfway house between what he is now and what he was then?
And he got a penalty for it as well, didn't he? It was back to elbows out Verstappen, where he didn't have the big advantage. He still came through to win the race, of course. But yeah, you do wonder where the challenge can come. And it's nice to see him challenge, because he is a gutsy driver that we sort of forget now. He's so serene, but under pressure, he can be elbows out, be the aggressive, sort of flary racer that you love to watch, but no one's able to challenge him just yet.
By the way, we've got an update from McLaren on Norris's steering problems. They say that it's an asymmetric power steering assistance problem. It's not to do with the upgrades. They've made some changes during the session to improve it, and we'll fix it afterwards.
That's a very odd problem. So there's power steering on these Formula One cars. You can set it up as you, with the driver's feedback, how you like. You need it to actually physically turn the car, otherwise with the downforce on the load, it'd be so high, you'd struggle in the high speed. And sounds like just an electrical gremlin then for Norris. But he has just come through and done a very fast lap, up to 5th place now, just ahead of his teammate by a couple of tenths. That's pretty encouraging for McLaren. 5th place. All of the drivers ahead of him have done a run on the mediums, apart from Sainz, who's at the top on the hards.
Yeah, encouraging signs from Carlos Sainz in these early stages, but he is on that hard compound tyre. Fastest lap for him was a 1:29.331, 3/10 clear of Perez. Hamilton, Russell, Norris, the top 5, just in front of his teammate Piastri. Zhou Guanyu in the Sauber up in 7th, ahead of the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, and Fernando Alonso is 9th in front of Yuki Tsunoda. That's the top 10, and it's Gasly, Stroll, Ricciardo, Bottas, Hulkenberg, the top 15, Verstappen, Albon, Magnussen, Sargent, and Leclerc, who is out of this session, having got into a spin in the early stages of this and had to walk back to the pits. Piastri on another lap at the moment. I'll tell you what has also been a little bit overshadowed if we're talking about moves in the technical realm. Ex-McLaren, David Sanchez joining Alpine as Executive Technical Director, basically having overall responsibility of their new sort of 3-pillared approach that Alpine are doing. Andrew, how significant a signing is that? Because he kind of left McLaren because it felt mutual. There wasn't really, the role he signed on for wasn't really there for him in the end.
So David Sanchez is very highly regarded in Formula One. He was the guy who was behind the concept of the 2017 and 2022 Ferraris. Now, if you remember, those were both cars that were introduced at the beginning of a regulation change, and they started those 2 seasons as the fastest cars in the field. Obviously, Red Bull then accelerated, and here we are now. And obviously, in the end, Mercedes got on top of Ferrari in 2017, even though it took quite a long time, and with a bit of help from the team and Sebastian Vettel shooting themselves in the foot. But so he's a friend of Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, which is why McLaren signed him in the first place. As you say, Harry, by the time they got him on board at McLaren, there wasn't really a role for him anymore because they'd made a whole load of other recruitment as well. But he's a top guy, and it's a good signing for Alpine. But they needed a good signing because they've lost a lot of people recently. Bob Bell, who had that similar title, who's very, very highly regarded, went to Aston Martin recently. Matt Harmon, the technical director, left. Dirk de Beer, the head of aerodynamics, left. Don't forget that last summer the team principal Otmar Zafnauer was sacked along with Alan Permain, the sporting director. They looked like a team in freefall for a long time. They started this year with pretty much the slowest car. So they really need David Sanchez and not just him, but other people of his ilk to help start turning that team around.
Norris just crossed the line, popped his McLaren up into 2nd behind Sainz, about a 10th off. Alpine also saying the car has finally hit the minimum weight as well. They introduced a new floor upgrade on Ocon's car last time out in China. Gasly now gets that upgrade as well. They said they found enough gains to implement it. So it feels like maybe, is this the beginning now of their season and their crawl back to, I suppose, being in the mid-tier?
Let's see. I mean,
or will they sell up to Andretti?
There's no, they don't have an intention to do that yet. There's a lot of people in Formula One wondering why they don't, wondering what Renault were trying to do with that team. It doesn't seem to have a lot of purpose. And even people questioning the Alpine brand strategy in Formula One. But that's for Luca De Meo, the Renault chief executive, to decide.
And signing David Sanchez, that is a signal of intent towards the future, isn't it? They're not doing that because they're about to sell out and they're trying to line it up for Andretti to take it on and do better. That's a sign of intent. New regs coming around the corner. They'd want to make sure that they're not in this hole that they're in a couple of years' time. And the thing is with Alpine as well, they've got 2, I think, pretty decent drivers, both race winners in Gasly and Ocon. They're still in the fight for, 7th in the championship, maybe 6th in the championship, because the difference between the top 5 teams and everyone else is quite big. So you've got RB picking up a few points here and there. You've got Haas nibbling away at 1 or 2 points a race. But if they can find a bit of performance, then they can turn it around quite quickly and still end up 6th or 7th in the championship. And it wouldn't really surprise me if they did that. And if this first horror show of the first 5 races is a little bit forgotten and they end up saving face and
could they have a McLaren turnaround like last year?
I mean, they really ought to. They're a manufacturer team. Let's not beat around the bush. It's not what their performance level at the moment is nowhere near good enough for their aspirations or their expectations. And they've got themselves in a bit of a hole. And I think Julian's right. The drivers are both very solid. But you have to ask the question, it's like you were saying earlier about Verstappen, Jolien. If you don't have one of those A-list drivers sort of always setting you the benchmark of where the car can always be, the point about those sorts of drivers, you know, the Verstappens, the Alonsos, the Hamiltons, they're pretty much nearly always exactly where the car can be at its limit. People like Ocon and Gasly aren't. So, and you look at when Ocon was with Alonso as teammates, they were often very close at the end of qualifying, but they would start the weekend and Alonso was always a lot quicker, and then Ocon would sort of edge his way closer as he sort of changed the car and followed and realized where the sort of ceiling of the car was. The question that lots of people ask about that sort of driver, and about Ocon in particular, is would he get to that ceiling without the guidance of the other driver? And we don't know the answer to that because the other driver's not there anymore. So yes, it's going to be car, yes, it's going to be engine, but you also have to ask whether there are performance limitations in the driver lineup as well.
But in relation to the fact that they are Alpine and they're not a top 5 team at the moment, there's too big a gap. So they can't expect to be signing a world champion with 20 years experience and one of the all-time greats.
Well, they did have him and they let him go.
Well, no,
and then they lost one of the hottest young prospects around in Oscar
they mentioned
Piastri.
that one too.
So they let 2 slip through their fingers, quite literally.
The management has been really poor in the last couple of years. The technical team have done also a poor job. Matt Harmon's left, Dirk de Beer's gone. Significant roles, technical director, head of aerodynamics, these are pretty much the people that make a car go fast, and they resigned on seeing the car on track in Bahrain and thought, we have not got this right, and that's why they're making changes. But when you look at Gasly, I mean, I rate Pierre as a solid midfield driver. He beat Tsunoda pretty comfortably. Tsunoda's now beating Ricciardo. Gasly's right there with Ocon, give and take over a year and a few races. They've got a better driver lineup than RB. They've got a better driver lineup than Williams. Haas, maybe similar-ish. They've got a better driver lineup than Sauber. The drivers, I don't think, are the issue. They're an issue if they want to go and race with the big boys again. But with where they're at, I think that they've got the better driver lineup of anyone in the bottom half of the field. They just haven't got a good car. And also, things like the pit stops are going wrong for them as well. Sometimes when the car's not good, the heads drop, you get sloppy in other areas, and it's all going wrong for them. So they need a bit of positive momentum again.
Fernando Alonso just completing a lap, but some high fuel runs being done out there at the moment. This is the sound of a replay of Lewis Hamilton coming through that really tight and twisty turn 14 and 15, having to cut across the chicane and straight line it. Couldn't quite get it turned in, lost a little bit of a grip at the rear. And made his way out. It's Sainz, Norris, Perez, Piastri, Hamilton. The top 5, Hamilton actually came into the pits after that little excursion off track.
It's been an odd on-track 45 minutes so far, 46 minutes. So Sainz is top of the times on the hards. Norris got down to a very good pace in the end in his second place. The runners on the mediums, that's your Red Bulls and your Mercedes, and Joe, who's now out there on a soft tyre, so he's about to put a decent time on the board, you'd hope, on a soft right now, although he's actually not. He's 6th down on Sainz coming through the first sector, so maybe on the next lap. But yeah, they all have done a long run now, so we're waiting for the last sort of 13.5 minutes left of this session to see where the pecking order is. It's a little bit open.
Well, you often get this, don't you, in these, especially it happened, I think if I remember it rightly, it happened in China as well, these first practice sessions on sprint weekends. There's so many disparate programs going on that you end up not really quite knowing what you're looking at because they're all doing different things at different times. Sometimes someone might be doing a high fuel load when someone else is doing a qualifying run. The qualifying run at the end of the session on a track that's not used very much like this will be much quicker than a qualifying run in the same car, on the same tyres, on the same fuel load if they'd done it 5 minutes after the start of the session. So they're tricky ones to read.
Joe picking up a little bit of pace in the middle sector, but he's still not about to make a huge inroads towards the top of the times. Typically, you'd have, with now under 13 minutes left of the session, you'd have everyone heading out on a soft tyre, as Joe is doing, and he comes through and actually doesn't improve on his mediums. Typically, you'd have that in this because we've got sprint qualifying coming up later on, and everyone wants to dial in. But there's an interesting thing with the way that the sprint format's changed. So in the days of old, you'd have Grand Prix qualifying later on, so you really want to make sure you're dialed in. In China last time out, Ferrari didn't run a qualifying simulation, and they saved a set of tyres. And I wonder if there's going to be more teams just thinking, do we really want to use up tyres in this session to then use more tyres in sprint qualifying to get a couple of points here or there? Or do we just save it all up for qualifying tomorrow, make sure we can throw the kitchen sink at it, and then have so many tyres in hand for the Grand Prix on Sunday?
Exactly, and that leads on to another much more sort of much wider question about the sprints, which is like, what are they for? What's the value? Why are we watching it?
So I was really interested in Fernando Alonso in China. Had a great sprint, was running in the top 3, top 2, and then 3rd as Verstappen came through. Got a penalty late on at a puncture and retired from the sprint. And he wasn't very happy with his penalty.
I don't blame him, frankly, but I don't know what you thought, but
I thought the penalty was fine, really. He launched in quite late on Sainz, forced him off the road, and it was a nothing penalty, wasn't it? It was a ludicrous penalty. It was a 10-second penalty for a guy that didn't finish the race. So what's the complaint, really? 3 points on the licence. Who cares? But the interesting thing
overall, though.
Also,
he'll be all right.
Yeah, he'll be fine. But the interesting thing with it is he was, in typical Alonso fashion, was not very happy about it and was like, well, maybe next time I just don't even do the sprint and I'll save the tyres for the Grand Prix and we'll just have a great Grand Prix. If this is how it's going to go, he's feeling like there's not a huge amount of point in going racing and getting your elbows out for... Albon's had a monster snap coming through turn 4. The sound you can hear him saving it in the Williams. Can you imagine if that was ending up in the wall? It's a bit of a...
I tell you what, Jolien, it's beginning to look like that car's got some pretty nasty vices, isn't it? They're crashing it a lot, those two drivers.
And again...
What is going on? Is that rear locking or what?
Copy, rear locking.
That's Albon then also running wide on the same lap, rear locking on the radio. Albon not happy. Well, he's down in 18th at the moment. And teammate Logan Sargent is actually up in 8th spot, having done a run on a medium compound tyre. But Williams was saying that this might well suit them, this track.
Yeah, but when you look at their crashes, they're all very easily explainable. Albon's notorious one now in Melbourne, where he bounced off the curb. He bounced off the curb. It wasn't really a random snap. He just came off the curb and it pitched him into an oversteer, which other people could have done. Sargent then had one in Japan, the next race in practice. Got wide, got on the grass. He wasn't really oversteering there. He just got a bit sloppy coming out of Dunlop and got on the grass. You're gonna go into the barriers. It doesn't
First
look
lap
like
in Japan, he got driven off the track by Ricardo, Albon.
Yeah, it was a collision. Yeah. He put himself in a position to potentially be forced out there, but it was really probably Ricardo squeezed him off the road. It was a collision. Sargent also went wide at the Degners in that race. Again, a little bit sloppy from Logan, who's under pressure. I'm not seeing that it's a snappy, horrible car to drive, but that lap, it did look it, but he's now come through and gone fourth.
Gasly in the Alpine on the softs just gone fastest, the 1:29.1. Sainz was fastest, now back out there on an outlap, just gearing up. He has also put the soft compound tyre on, so I think we're going to see more and more cars sticking the red rubber on. This is the sound of Verstappen and his radio.
That was a gust of tailwind there into that corner there, Max.
That's because he ran wide. Was that turn 7 there? But
turn 7, yeah.
Just to go back to the Albon Sargent conversation we were having much earlier in the session and Sargent's future, the gap again, 6/10 between Albon and Sargent is becoming quite consistent, which is why I think Sargent's days are numbered.
But the thing with Sargent, what do they expect? This is the gap always last year, and they retained him. He's not made a step up. No one's expecting him to be right there with Albon, I don't think.
And it wasn't exactly a stellar Formula 2 career either. I remember him in his final race in Formula 2 fighting to finish in the top 6 so he could get enough super license points, and that was on a knife edge as well.
Yeah, in reality, they retained him because of the backing he was bringing to the team, and they can't be surprised when Albon's still considerably quicker, and on top of that, they've taken him out of the car and crushed his morale as well in Australia.
Sound of Sainz just threading his way through the middle sector on the soft compound tyre. He's a 10th up on Gasly. He's currently fastest now, making his way down that long 1.2 kilometre back straight before you get to the braking zone. Touches on the brakes just before the 100-metre braking board, slings it into the left-hander and then onto the throttle. The pit lane entry to your right, he keeps it planted round the final corner, taken flat out across the line for Sainz. Fastest lap, a 1:28.979.
But Russell's going quicker, fastest through the first 2 sectors on his set of soft tyres, so he comes out of turn 17, the final proper corner, and now sweeps flat out through the right-hander past our commentary position, and he goes to the top of the times by just over half a tenth.
His teammate fastest of anybody in the first sector.
The tires are going hot. I have no grip. I'm driving on eggshells.
And that's Verstappen, who is not happy out there, driving on eggshells, no grip for the man who's down in 18th at the moment.
Hey, he's been through the runoff area a couple of times on the braking zone, struggling for peak pressure. Now he's not able to get a lap on the soft. 6.5 minutes left of the session. It's an odd session, this one, for Verstappen. Perez got down to a pace pretty quickly, still in seventh, but he's just left the pits now on a set of soft tyres. We'll see what he can do. He's been better so far. Verstappen yet to get a time on the board. So here Hamilton hit the brakes for the final corner. He's lost a little bit of time in the middle sector, straightens up the wheel and exits out at turn 17, flat out accelerating past the last DRS line and crosses the line up to third. It's a good day for Mercedes.
It is worth saying in that context, by the way, we talked about the McLaren upgrade at the beginning of the session. We didn't mention the Mercedes are the other team with a big upgrade. Also on the floor, they're not expecting theirs to be as big as McLaren's is. They've got more to come in the next few races to add on to it. But it is, you know, the floor is the area where these cars get their performance from. And it's not just the edge of the floor, it's also under the floor. They're not obligated to list on those documents that we get, by the way, anything that's not visible. So they only have to mention things that you can see. So any change to the floor body, as they call it, which is the sort of venturi basically, which is where all the performance comes from, they don't have to talk about. But there are changes on the floor body on the Mercedes, as there are on the McLaren.
Well, it's Russell fastest, a 1:28.910. Sainz half a tenth back. Hamilton third. Tsunoda in the RB on the medium compounded tyres, just split it up into fourth. And in front of Gasly, then it's Magnussen, Ocon, Stroll, Norris, Ricciardo at the top 10. Actually, well, he's just been knocked out because Hülkenberg has gone up into seventh in the Haas, again on that soft compounded tyre. Sergio Perez also embarks on his first proper run on that soft compounded tyre as well. Little bit of traffic, though, he's had to negotiate, and I think he's actually backed out of it as well.
Loads of traffic in the first sector. It was Bottas that he was sweeping around, plus one other I didn't see. So Perez backs off it and will go again on the next lap. The caveat with these times, you've got Russell, Sainz and Hamilton separated by a tenth at the top, which feels very normal. But then Tsunoda in the RB is fourth, 2.5 tenths off Russell on the medium tyres.
That's a good lap.
It's a great lap. But then Gasly in the Alpine is there 2 tenths away. You've got both Haas's 3 and 4 tenths, which shows that, I mean, the field is close in 2024, but I would expect that ceiling to be lifted somewhat.
Track evolution?
Yeah, track evolution, but they're all on track at the same time right now, pumping in the times. Perez is on a better lap here. And yeah, Perez with the fastest middle sector
so he didn't
anyway.
back off, actually. It was the Verstappen was the other traffic that Perez was making his way by. He's gone fastest as anybody in the middle sector now on that straight.
Yeah, so this is Perez's soft tyre lap. He was bulked though, wasn't he, in the first sector? And then Verstappen, maybe what we saw coming out of the pits.
We definitely had a Bottas and a Sauber in his way, so perhaps a little bit limited in the first sector. Clearly, though, still finds almost half a tenth of a second to go fastest. Perez with 3.5 minutes just over that remaining of this one and only free practice session here in Miami. Of course, the second sprint race this season, back to back with the first one, China, just a couple of weeks ago. Perez, Russell, Sainz, Hamilton, Tsunoda the top 5, Gasly, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Ocon, Albon the top 10, Stroll, Norris, Ricciardo, Bottas, Piastri the top 15, Sargent, Zhou Guanyu, Alonso, Verstappen down in 19th. Back out there again on an outlap, so we'll see what he's got. He is on the soft compounded tyre. Charles Leclerc, who had an early bath in this practice session, having spun in the turn 16, making his way onto the back straight, and then couldn't quite make the 17-point turn work, and in the end, overheating issues on the clutch, and that was his day done. Verstappen now starts his soft compound tyre lap.
Let's have a listen into this one then. Flat out coming through turns 2 the left, and then turn 3 the right-hander. Goes around a slower car and carries plenty of speed into turns 4 left, 5 right, and then triple left, 6, 7 and 8, slowing it down to a late apex at turn 8, which will launch him onto a long run up towards the braking zone for turn 11, flat out through a couple of meanders towards the right-hander now, and he is considerably up on Perez in the first sector, but Perez's first sector was compromised, so that's not the best reference. Let's see how he is on the brakes, where he struggled earlier on. Looks a little more hooked up now. He's fighting the car through the apex of the left-hander of 11, long right-hander at 12, up the hill, chicane, left, and then bouncing over the curb on the right-hand side. Very, very tight through turn 16, right up to the wall on the right-hand side on the exit, and okay, he's okay. He's got his car in the window. 6/10 up on Perez through 2 sectors.
Verstappen's form is well and truly back in the game as he makes his way down that over 1.2 kilometre back straight, brakes for the left hand, a little bit of traffic in front of him, does get it turned in, almost touches the wall right on the outside, on the throttle to the line then for Verstappen. Russell's fastest of anybody in the first sector, but right now it's Verstappen fastest of anybody, a 1:28.5, over 2/10 clear of his teammate Perez.
He actually didn't make the best of that final sector, got a little bit too deep on the brakes and had to wait a lot for the throttle, so there's more in there for Verstappen. Russell is on a better lap here, fastest through the first sector, as you said. He's going to have a nice slipstream from a Haas car coming over the line, so Russell currently third, might get closer to Verstappen.
Goes second, 1:28.7, just a couple of tenths shy for George Russell. So fast laps coming thick and fast in these closing stages. It is just practice, but this is the one and only practice session they will get. The next session up will be qualifying for the sprint race as Sainz pips Russell in the Ferrari and goes second. Let's see what the two McLarens have got. Big upgrades for McLaren. Piastri, though, with only half the upgrade. Still, though, goes enough for second fastest. A 10th off. Norris coming in through the middle sector. He's backed out of it and gone into the pit lane. So has he had a bit of an issue in that middle sector? Tsunoda is going to come round. He managed to put a very good lap in on the medium compound tyre in his RB, a Miami special livery, quite a colourful livery on that car, crosses the line, lost a lot of time in that first sector, does improve but stays at 7th in front of Gasly, Ricciardo, Magnussen in the top 10 with just 5 seconds left in the session.
Norris pitted off what was also a quick lap, so Piastri up to second, and then Norris, I think he's sandbagging. I think the middle sector, he was within a 10th of Verstappen's fastest, and it's the same as he did in China in the 1 hour practice. Doesn't put a time on the board, could have topped it, but chose to pit and not put an extra 5.5 kilometres on the tyres. That's what he's done now. So McLaren in a solid window.
Ocon in the Alpine on that soft compound tyre gets up into 9th, just in front of his teammate Gasly, who takes the checkered flag. Magnussen crosses the line. Good middle sector for Magnussen, but lost time in the first and final sectors. Stays in 12th. Let's see who else is coming through for a good lap. Nico Hülkenberg just about to cross the line as well in the other Haas. Bit of a qualifying ace Hülkenberg has become since his return to Formula 1 with Haas, with now a Sauber Audi contract in his back pocket. Takes the flag. Can't quite pip his teammate, though, in this practice session, just behind him in 13th. But with a strange session, I think it's fair to say, for this one and only practice session that we will get. Next up will be sprint qualifying, but at the moment, after taking a little bit of a while to find that lap time, it's Max Verstappen, fastest at the end of FP1. A 1:28.595, a 10th clear of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Carlos Sainz is third. Russell, Stroll to round out the top 5. Then it's Perez, Hamilton, Tsunoda, Ocon, Gasly the top 10. Ricciardo, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Albon, Zhou the top 15. Norris, Bottas, Sargent, Alonso 19th, and Charles Leclerc with only 3 laps on the board. Couldn't get a competitive lap time in. Will be on the back foot, 20th and last. Well, we will just see these cars coming in. Can we gear up then for sprint qualifying and see what exactly occurs? Jolien, your big takeaways then from this weird FP1?
Well, Castle Prix, Verstappen's going to be the man to beat, and even though we had 55 minutes of thinking there might be a fight on, I still think he's going to be quick. But I'm looking forward to seeing what McLaren can do, particularly. Leclerc obviously is on the back foot. Sainz did a solid job in the other Ferrari, showing a bit of pace as well. But yeah, McLaren, that's a decent start for them, I think, with their upgrades.
Well, a few hours then until we get going for all things sprint. And, well, the cards have been somewhat laid, Rosanna.
They have, haven't they? But I think the big question remains, how long is this soft tyre going to last? Are they only going to be able to get one lap out of it? Is it even going to last a lap? So how are the teams and drivers going to go about this sprint qualifying session? And what does that mean for the Grand Prix qualifying as well tomorrow, Jolien?
Well, it'll be one lap for qualifying on the softs. That much is clear. I think everyone was managing to get the tyres to go through the whole lap. It was just Verstappen made a mistake on his best run and had a lock-up. He was struggling a little bit with the brakes. And then the good thing for the teams and the drivers is the sprint qualifying obviously matters less. It's all about Grand Prix qualifying in reality tomorrow afternoon. The sprint's a bit of fun before that, but it does give them a very good indication of where they're at in terms of car setup, which they can then change again before qualifying, and it gives them a better feel. We normally talk about FP2 quali simulations. There's no better quali simulation than a qualifying session.
Absolutely. And as I look at that order that you just read out, Harry, I mean, it is mixed up. If that was the order on Sunday afternoon after the Grand Prix, would we be happy campers in Miami, do you think?
Well, I think we'd take that. You've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different teams in the top 5. You've got Stroll up there, Piastri on the front row. Sainz be looking pretty quick as well. And, well, Leclerc, his teammate, will be very much on the back foot, though. So with just that one and only practice session, Leclerc has got a lot of time to find. But he does historically go well on street circuits, but here in particular, he does have a habit of finding the wall more often than not.
OK, so who's going to be the fastest man on track come sprint qualifying? Harry?
I think it's going to be Max Verstappen.
Jolien?
Max Verstappen.
Andrew Benson?
Max Verstappen.
Well, full house, boys. Well, do join us for sprint qualifying later on. We'll be live at 4:25 online. Then you can join us as well on BBC Sports Extra after the Rugby League. Max Verstappen fastest in Miami thus far, ahead of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren and Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. How will it all play out during sprint qualifying? Join us later on. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.